That was a bit of...
My question is, what exists outside of the illusion? Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions. This game is called In the Maia or Out of the Maia? In or out of the Maia? Crystals of consciousness.
Out of the Maia.
They exist outside of the Maia?
Yeah.
Neutrinos. Inside or outside?
Outside.
Neutrinos do not exist in the Maia.
I think of the Maia as, well, okay. The mental Maia is everything we have a name for. So I guess technically everything we can list is in the Maia. But the operation of such things on the Maia makes me think, for the context of this question, outside of the Maia.
So we've got two crystals of consciousness held together in the illusion of separateness by the magnetic monopole, moving in a straight line through space outside of the Maia.
I mean, it depends. Okay, it's kind of an interesting question. So in base theory, we learned that there's 5 bases that build the Maia. So I consider anything that builds the Maia outside of the Maia. And then we learned that there's 4 dimensions, which are the Maia itself, that is built by the other 5 bases. So really we have 9 dimensions divided into 2 fundamental categories: atomic matter and the time that the atomic matter changes through, which are the 4 dimensions of space-time, relativism. And then we have 5 bases which are somehow preceding or responsible for building the Maia. So neutrinos are kind of the bridge between the two. Crystals of consciousness are outside of the Maia. I mean, if we're saying the words crystals of consciousness, those words and our understanding of them are all within the Maia, because that's kind of the thing. Like, if you really want to make the distinction inside and outside the Maia be relevant, for it to actually mean anything, to be at what Bateson calls, this is what Gregory Bateson calls, a difference that makes a difference. Because there's some differences that don't make any difference, really. Like, really, But to be a difference that makes a difference, we really have to make it the distinction of, is it in Einsteinian relativism, 3 physical dimensions and 1 dimension of time? That's inside the Maia. Or is it something that helps construct the Maia or build the Maia?
But I'm just thinking, okay, we've got the illusion and then we've got the non-illusion.
Yeah, what's actually building the illusion? What's making the illusion happen?
But I mean, when we talk about the fact that we're actually just moving through space in a straight line, and each of us is this quantum of two crystals of consciousness held together by the monopole. So in that reality, like outside of the illusion,
yeah,
what is there? Are planets there?
Well, planets have crystals of consciousness. So the planet is atomic. I mean, that's the interesting thing is when you
stars.
Yeah, what's interesting is, so at the time that Ra was developing it, he thought that around 6% of the known universe was atomic, and the other 94% was dark matter and dark energy. Now we have a similar number of what is thought to be atomic matter, the total mass of the universe, 6%, maybe 8%, 9%, it depends on the model. And now it's actually thought that around 20 or 30% of the mass of the universe is neutrinos, and then the rest is dark matter. Everything that has mass in the atomic universe is really only 1/20th to 1/10th of the universe, somewhere in that range, depending on what model. And I think 6%, maybe 8%, but generally I think 6% is the number that I've seen. As from my understanding, now neutrinos are thought to be around 1/4 of the mass of the universe, which is crazy because they have such a small amount of mass, but there's so many of them that they are probably around 1/4 of the mass. And then another, 5% or a little more is atomic matter, and then the rest of it, 68%, 70%, somewhere in there, is dark matter. The numbers change depending on the models. This is just how the models work. But that was a bit.
My question is, what exists outside of the illusion? Like, if not for this reality that we live in, because I've heard people in HDBs who are like, oh well, science, blah, blah, blah. That's just the Maya. It's like, okay, well, what is there outside of the Maya? If we don't want to believe in this illusion, if we're just like, well, that's not reality. That's just the illusion. Okay, well, outside of this illusion, what is there? Is it not just the most boring thing ever? Is it not just your consciousness just floating in a straight line? Like, what is there anything there?
The illusion is awareness, and outside of the illusion is mechanics. And the mechanics determine the awareness because we can only be aware of what has occurred. And so there's actually a really wonderful video called The Reality of the Virtual by the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. And he talks about how in our illusion, in our experience, he doesn't use the word Maya, but we could say in our experience of the Maya, in our experience of the everyday texture of reality, we are protected from the real. And it's funny, how could the real be opposite from reality? Don't they mean the same thing? Well, not for him. Not for him. What is real for him is what can be scientifically proven and demonstrated through, for instance, quantum physics. But reality is the texture of reality as we experience it. I can look around and I can see there's all these things in reality. And so part of what we see in reality is things are solid. Well, we know in the real, they're not actually solid, right? In the real,
Right.
solidity is an illusion, but reality makes things... Sorry. Thank you. Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah. So part of reality is the smoothing over. I mean, what Zizek says is, we know in the real everyone sweats. But the reality is when you look at someone, you're not looking at their sweat. You're not thinking, oh, this person defecates. Oh, this person, has... You're not seeing... In fact, something Zizek points out is that David Lynch is a great filmmaker precisely because he understands the horror of the real as encroaching upon reality. So if you imagine the beginning of Blue Velvet, have you seen Blue Velvet?
Not in 30 years.
Well, one of the opening scenes, if not the opening scene, is the father, the sort of patriarch, who's mowing his lawn, and he has a heart attack, and he falls to the grass, and instead of some sort of dramatic music, which would be reality, Maya, the emotional reaction, instead, the camera zooms in to the grass, and you see little bugs crawling around, and you just see the texture. The sound fades up and goes, you hear like extremely loud amplification of the sound of the bug legs moving. And that's basically the real, in that it's the texture of reality that is smoothed over or ignored. And of course, I mean, it depends what level we're talking about. It maybe even that's all Maya, right? Because anything experienced is Maya in some sense. One thing I get out of your question is, what is it to experience something you can't experience? Well, you can't experience it, right? It's like if the Maya is everything that's experienceable, and then something else is making the experience possible, all we can really do is surmise. All we can really do is demonstrate or prove that there are certain preconditions necessary for our experience. And we can't experience those preconditions. They're the preconditions through which we experience. It's like we can't experience the frame. We're seeing through the frame. But maybe in some sense, we can get an idea of what the frame is. And that's like base theory in human design. We're studying what are the preconditions for the experience of reality to occur. Well, there has to be an environment. There has to be a personality. There has to be a body. There has to be, and so on. And all these things that have to exist. But let's play the game a little more. I don't mean to like scissors. Definitely part of the Maya.
Right. Well, I mean, the real question is just what is there outside of this illusion? Like what really is there, and is it worth it? Is it make any sense to even consider this? Because,
well, it's a similar question to like Plato's archetypes. what is the archetypal? And so if you have all these flowers and then you have the idea of flower, what is the idea of flower? Is it some pattern that all flowers draw from, or is it just an illusion that we can imagine by taking every existing flower and applying a generalized form of negation that says not this flower, not this flower, not this flower? Once you've said no to every literal thing, what's left? What is there when it's not anything that we can point to? Because if all we can point to is the Maya, what can't we point to then? What can't we indicate?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think what we can't indicate is the mechanics. And I know mechanics is kind of a broad conceptual term, but I would say, for instance, I can't predict what will happen when I have an electromagnetic with somebody, but I can explain it once it has happened. And by looking at the electromagnetic I have with 10 different people, but it's all the same electromagnetic, I can find a commonality that exists between all those people. Similarly, I can't predict what a flower is going to do, but by looking at 10 different flowers, I can describe the commonality between those flowers. And that is what's outside of the Maya, the commonality, because the Maya has no commonality. It just has what is. So this is...
I don't get that at all.
Okay, this is its own unique atomic commonality. For something to be the same as the scissors, it would have to take up the same point in space. No other pair of scissors is the same as this pair of scissors. And yet, there is a similarity because scissors have a similar function, a similar use to cut. And I guess you could say it's kind of, this gets almost into Aristotle. This gets into what he called the formal cause, because there were 4 different causes, right? And the formal cause of something is actually its purpose. And the purpose, so say I have a knife. I might be cutting vegetables for food, but then you can also use a knife to kill. It's a very different purpose for that knife to exist. If you only know about cutting vegetables and then somebody else uses a knife for something else, right? You can use a knife to make a hole in your belt to be able to hold your pants up. That's a totally new purpose for it. What we're really getting to is when we talk about inside and outside the Maya, we're talking about the relationship of signifiers and signified. And it's really the relationship of things to their purpose. So the same knife can be used for many purposes, but many different things can be used for the same purpose. This scissors can be used for the purpose of making a hole in a belt, just as a knife could. You could actually cut lettuce with scissors, just as you could cut lettuce with a knife. So multiple things have the same purpose. These purposes exist outside the Maya, because the purpose is a mechanical function.
This is nothing like what I thought you would say.
Okay, well, I don't know. I mean,
no, keep going. You're on like a completely different stream of thought.
My stream of thought is that essentially the Maya is everything that we can measure, weigh, point to, and so on. And so the Maya, I guess there's the physical and the mental Maya. The physical Maya is everything atomic, and the mental Maya is everything nameable or describable. And anytime we create new words, we have taken something that did not exist in the Maya and helped create something new in the Maya. Just as anytime we've created a new form, usually for a particular purpose, like we have the form of chair to sit in, we have the form of table to place things on, and yet we don't have a form for, a flying chair or whatever. Like we don't have a form for a chair that you can move in, unless we call it an airplane or something. But I guess I'm saying, like, anytime you create a new form, even a new type of airplane, a new type of table, a new type of chair, you created something new in the Maya. And so anytime you're creating something new in the Maya, obviously there's something from outside of the Maya that is expressing or impressing itself or insisting upon the Maya.
What is that thing?
That is what is outside of the Maya. And so it's going to be things like purposes, and really, in some sense, consciousness is outside of the Maya. Awareness is outside of the Maya.
So there's like this sort of
and mechanics
intersection between tangible and intangible.
Right. And the Maya is the tangible, and the intangible is constantly insisting upon what is tangible to create something new that is tangible that
These
was
are like
never formerly
intangible
tangible.
things that are trying to manifest into tangibility.
Yes, exactly. And there are mechanics that happen where you take a collision of two substances and something new is formed from that. And the substances themselves are of the Maya, but the process under which they create something new is the mechanics, which are sort of the laws of the Maya. So there's laws or rules of the Maya that are not part of the Maya themselves. Because if the law was part of the Maya, you could destroy it because everything in the Maya can be destroyed or created. But there's a sort of, it's kind of like information. Like information is within the Maya, but there's also something that we can call the true information, which is that nothing can be created or destroyed, or the true energy that can. It's hard to use words to describe it because these words are all usually used to refer to things within the Maya. So if we're trying to refer to something outside of the Maya, we have to borrow words from within the Maya and say it's similar to this thing in the Maya. It's similar to the vapors from water. It's similar to this. It's similar to that. But yet the vapors of water, the gas forming or whatever, that is in the Maya. So all we can say is that thought is similar to these vapors, but it is not a vapor. It's something outside of what is measurable. We can't really measure it.
But do these thoughts and concepts and purposes, like, are they things that hover in some space somewhere? Like, I don't, like, what, outside the Maya, there's still movement, right? Like, there's still space to move through.
I don't know. I mean, space is base 5, and so I think there's not space. There's a dimension that allows space to be created. So what we really have to get into. So here's an interesting question: what is possible? And then we have what is possible, and then we have what is the ability for the horizon of possibility to change, so that new things that were not previously possible become possible. So the French philosopher Gilles Deleuze uses the term virtual to describe everything that is possible. It doesn't actually happen, but it's possible that it could happen. However, does the virtual change? If so, something that really wasn't possible previously could be possible in the future. Another way of putting it is that within the Maya, A can change to become B. So water can change to become ice. Ice can change to become water. Water can change to become gas. Gas can change to become water. Like these things change. A becomes B. B becomes C. C becomes B. B becomes A. One thing changes to another. Well, the philosopher Quentin Melissu, he proposes, can we imagine something that can so irrevocably change that it was never what it changed from in the first place? A becomes B, but then it becomes having never been A in the first place because it retroactively erases the fact it was ever A to start with. And he actually says this is what happens. Things become what they always were. And that is an irrevocable, unidirectional, or unilateral change. And these are the kinds of questions we have to ask. When something comes to exist in the Maya, it seems as though it has always existed from the beginning. Like, how can something ever really be added or removed?
Right.
It's actually just revealed to have always been there. We just never knew it was there in the first place. And so I think when we're talking about the Maya, we're basically using the rules that everybody is comfortable with, the rules of reality as we know them. And yet when we're talking about the rules, we have a totally new set of rules. How do the rules change? You know what I mean? Can the rules for creating the Maya change? And I think they can. And that's the really interesting question is, it's not how do things change, because we have rules about how things can change. And the rules are not part of the Maya. The rules are outside of the Maya. So I guess really, in some sense, personality crystal is in the Maya because it is something that abides by certain rules. And yet, it's also outside of the Maya insofar as it's not a measurable it doesn't follow the rules of the Maya. It's something that is a rule of the Maya itself. It's kind of like a level up. It's like, what happens when we're not talking about something that follows the rules, but something that is the rule that is followed? In some sense, it's like assumptions. Anytime we talk about assumptions, we need new assumptions, because assumptions are what we use to talk about things in the first place. It's meta. It's taking a zoom out. Anytime we're talking about a frame, we need a new frame within which to talk about the frame. So if we're talking about things that exist in day-to-day reality, we're using a frame. But then when we're talking about the frame, well, how do we talk about the frame? We're borrowing words from day-to-day reality, but they no longer mean the same thing. Like quantum physics. Quantum physics is a frame for our reality, but it's not a frame that we can understand. We can understand it so far as we can make similes with everyday reality. We can't understand it when we just use technical terms. I mean, a computer might understand it better than we do in some sense, because computers can come up with mathematical models that say all sorts of things, but we don't necessarily understand how to apply what that is said. It's kind of like, how does sense making work? There was a guy from the CIA who I used to know, who was a consultant at Amazon, and where I used to work. And he would say, the problem is not the information we have gathered. The problem is the sense making. That our intelligence agencies have all the information in the world, but they don't have all the sense making capacity in the world. Because being able to take information and turn it into a story that can be understood is the challenge. And so I think that's really the challenge we're up against, is the challenge of our own understanding, not the challenge of information. We get all sorts of information, we just don't know how to turn it into a story. And you see that I struggle to turn it into a story as well. Mm-hmm. I'm telling the story of how we have to borrow words from everyday reality to describe things that actually allow for everyday reality to exist. Everyday reality doesn't enable everyday reality to exist, because then it's kind of like, okay, one last little point. Quentin Melissu says he can prove that everything in the atomic universe, everything that currently exists as part of our atomic reality, is unnecessary. Because if anything were necessary, the moment it were destroyed, reality would cease to exist. So if there was a particular statue of a particular idol that was required for reality to exist, or if there was a particular action, like people had to pray at sunrise for the next day to continue, the moment they stopped praying, reality would stop. The moment that statue was turned to dust, reality would cease. And yet that doesn't happen. Everything that exists can be destroyed, and yet reality continues. Therefore, reality, or what allows reality, the real, which is what allows the experience of reality to occur, must exist without any contingency or dependence, in the last instance, on anything that currently exists. So nothing that exists is necessary. Therefore, what does not exist is necessary.
Let's do it there.
Okay. Anyway, thanks for that. Thank you for that. Okay.